All right. Trumpeter John Lake is here to talk about his debut album, Seven Angels, which is available right this very moment. He'll also be playing some solo trumpet for us. So, trumpet players, fellow sufferers, you're going to like this. I'm Brian Zimmerman. This is the Jazziz Last Call. All right, and before we get into today's conversation with John Lake, wanted to let you know about a new album from ECM Records. We're going to stick with the trumpet theme. This one is from trumpeter Avishai Cohen and his group Big Vicious. It is an album of the same name. It is called Big Vicious. Really eclectic sound here. Avishai pulls from every single one of his influences on this album, including modern jazz, raga music, Israeli music, even rock and electronic dance music. Some cool covers on this album too. He's covering Moonlight Sonata by Beethoven for one, and then the tune Teardrop by Massive Attack. So like I say, if you want to kind of expand your listening horizons, this is a great album to do so. Big Vicious by Avishai Cohen on ECM Records. Wanted to also let you know about our latest issue. That would be our summer 2020 issue, which is on newsstands now and has already mailed to subscribers. Now, fortunately, all of the content from this print issue has been converted into web articles that can be read on our website, jazziz.com. Now, you will need a digital subscription to read them, but fortunately, we are offering a special subscription rate for Jazziz Last Call viewers. For just 99 cents per month for 3 months, you can unlock digital access, unlimited digital access to all of the articles in this print issue, plus previous print issues. Then, come fall, when we release our forthcoming issue, you'll be enrolled to receive a complimentary print edition. Now, our fall issue is all about the art of the album. So collecting albums, producing albums, listening to albums, album cover art. And like I say, you subscribe for 99 cents per month right now. You get all the digital content from this issue. Plus, come fall, you'll have a complimentary print issue in your mailbox. So check it out right now. Wanted to also remind you that we're pre-taping these shows right now and airing them at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. But starting next week, we will be coming to you live. All shows will be live at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time in the same places, on Facebook Live, on YouTube, even on our website where you can check them out there. But I just wanted to send a quick reminder. The shows will be live once again, so you can chime in from wherever you're watching, send in your questions and all that good stuff. All right, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into today's episode. My guest today is trumpeter John Lake, now based in New York City, but originally from the Midwest, Colorado via Ohio. His new album, Seven Angels, emerged from his transition to New York City and grew out of his desire to take his musical foundation, which is rooted in kind of that hard-bop trumpet tradition, and merge it with modern compositional techniques. So we've got a lot of originals on there, plus some really, really cool covers. He's here to talk about it. So let's go ahead and welcome him. It's last call. John Lake, you want to go one more round?
Let's do it. Hey, Brian. Sure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely a pleasure, man. And like I say, the world is crazy right now, but I appreciate you taking the time to stop by the last call. As our viewers know, the first thing we do is give a little toast to someone, some place, some idea, something. So, John, who are we honoring? Who, what, where, when, why, how are we honoring with this call?
Well, I suppose we should honor the great Johnny Mandel, who passed away maybe last night or today. Great big band arranger and composer, and he will be missed.
Absolutely. Here is to Johnny Mandel. And to Carl Reiner, too. Sad to hear
right,
his
that.
passing. Yeah.
98 years old.
98. So had a good run and a lot of laughs along the way. John, man, you are based in New York now.
That's correct. Yeah, Brooklyn.
Okay, very cool. When did you move there?
That would be the summer of 2013. So just over 7 years now, 7 years and a month.
Okay, right on. And you were coming from where was it again?
Oh, man. Well, before that, I lived for about 7 months in Bradenton, Florida, which is just south of Tampa.
Well, we're down here in Florida. We're down here in Fort Lauderdale, yeah.
Cool. I played a few gigs in Florida while I was down there, and it's a lot of driving. You have to drive pretty much anywhere you want to play, you know?
This is true. True. Yeah, no public transit to speak of at all. And that's you went to school in the Midwest, right, where you grew up?
Yeah, that's correct. So before that, I did my master's at the University of Colorado at Boulder. So I lived there. I stayed a couple of years after. So Denver, Boulder area for 5 years. And then before that, I was in Cincinnati, which is closer to my hometown in Ohio.
Very cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
not a bad place to rest your head, Cincinnati and Boulder.
No, it's
So
gorgeous. Yeah.
tell me about the transition to New York, because one thing I read in the press materials for you and the new album was, you loved your time in the Midwest at those jazz schools, and both are fantastic programs, but you
Yeah.
kind of felt you were missing out on the big city experience.
Yeah, somewhat. I really am grateful that I got to go to school at Cincinnati. For one, it's a really excellent music school, and I met a lot of great people there, some of whom I'm still playing with today. And I received a lot of excellent instruction there. But I also think that by virtue of it being sort of a smaller city, if I had gone to New York when I was 18, I came from a very small town of about 10,000 people. I probably would have been like, get me out of here. It's just like, this is crazy.
Yeah. A little overwhelmed.
Yeah, a little bit. And I certainly felt that even when I moved here in 2013 to some extent. But I had a lot of great formative experiences in Cincinnati and Denver. And I was recently telling somebody, sometimes it seems like you might get a different musical education in those cities, because of the fact that it's so much smaller. You end up forming maybe deeper relationships with the people in your immediate circle, because that's all you have to play with. Here, it's like you can throw a stick and hit a tenor player in Brooklyn, but like back there, there's only so many people to play with and so many venues to play. So the relationships maybe run a little bit deeper, which is something that I really cherish,
Cool. So you wouldn't have done it any other way. And, maybe for someone considering, again, to graduate from, their arts program or their jazz program or whatever in high school, and they're considering either making the move or attending, jazz school somewhere else. You have no regrets about doing that way, right?
No, I don't think so. And, I'm sort of the perspective that it wouldn't matter. Our history is our history. It's like that, that was the only course that I could see for myself at the time. And in fact, I feel very fortunate to have gone on that course. There's the high school I came up in had a good jazz program, but it wasn't an arts high school by any stretch, and there was only one school for the whole town. So the fact that I was able to get into an actual conservatory in the Midwest in Cincinnati, Ohio, was like a real blessing. So I'm very grateful for, the route that brought me to where I am now.
Cool, man.
Yeah.
And as you transition to New York, what was the biggest sense of culture shock for you? I imagine you had been there before, though, but visiting there and living there are two very different things.
Yeah. Well, I'm a nice, polite Midwestern boy. And when you walk down the street anywhere else, you say, hi, how's it going?
Right. Right.
And here, I was just excited to be here, first of all, on top of all that. So I was so just like walking down the street, like looking around, and people were like, who is this psychopath looking at everybody, and saying hi, like, what is wrong with this guy?
Why is he so friendly?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think that was a big, and people are skeptical of that here, when I certainly am now that I've lived here a little while. If I'm walking through a subway station, somebody tries to talk to me, I'm like, get away from me.
It rubbed off on you a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, they're very friendly. And not to say that the New Yorkers aren't friendly. They are friendly.
They're very,
It takes some time to chip away, out that hard outer shell. Yeah, I made the opposite move from the East Coast to the Midwest for graduate school.
Yeah.
And I had to deal with the opposite cultural shock, which was, and this is where I noticed it at parties, right? If there's one more brownie left on a plate, okay, and I reach for it and someone else reaches for it at the same time, the Midwesterner will say, no, you have it. Now in New York, that means exactly. In New York, that means I'm eating the brownie, right? You offered it. In the Midwest, not so.
There's like a rule of what do they call it? Chivalry, where you're supposed to refuse something 3 times. If something was offered to you, you're supposed to refuse it 3 times.
Yes.
People here don't do that.
Unwritten rules of the Midwest. Very cool, man. Very cool. Well, hey, dude, I want to talk about the new album because I've been listening to it a lot. Sure. It's really great. I am a trumpet player. So obviously I'm drawn to it from that angle. And yeah, again, in the press materials, it's written a lot about your kind of musical foundation, which is for trumpet players, is a lot of our musical foundations, was that kind of post-bop, hard-bop, Clifford Brown, Lee Morgan, Freddie Hubbard, Woody Shaw vein.
Yeah.
I imagine that was a huge source of influence for you coming up.
Absolutely. I think one of my first records that I really dug into was actually, it was sold as a Wynton Marsalis record, but it was actually a bootleg. It's been making the rounds for years now. It's a bootleg of the Jazz Messengers when Wynton was with them for a short time. Yeah, and his playing at the time was like, very Hard-Bop, Freddie Hubbard oriented. And I was just like, wow, this is like, but he was doing amazing things on the instrument, as Wynton can do.
Yeah.
And then I went from there to Lee Morgan really grabbed me. And of course, Freddie Hubbard and Woody Shaw. It's such a strong lineage that, that direct lineage going all the way back to Fats Navarro. And as you said, Clifford Brown.
Yep. Totally. And it's interesting because there's such a dynamic range of the trumpet. It's one of the things where the voice, a personal voice, is communicated with such, transparency. You can't hide in the trumpet. And that's why personal dialects tend to come through so much. I kind of found my way into the trumpet through Maynard Ferguson. My dad was a huge Maynard Ferguson nut, which is one extreme of trumpet playing.
Yeah.
But because of my own choppage limitations, I eventually gravitated, to the Chet Bakers, Blue Mitchells, Kenny Dorhams, which is a very quieter kind of, more subdued, understated. Yeah. And it's amazing that the same, that dynamic range can exist for the same instrument. Yeah. So I know you have your trumpet close by, and we talked a little bit about this before we hopped on the interview here, but I was hoping you could maybe demonstrate some of those, what we call trumpet dialects, accents from various trumpet players. And we can start first and foremost with one of your heroes, Lee Morgan.
Sure.
And maybe we can talk a little bit about what his sound was and what made his sound so unique, so idiosyncratic.
Well, Lee Morgan, he was one of those guys who was very talented from a young age, like 17, 18 years old. He's playing with real heavy hitters, and what people really loved about him was his very fiery personality, and a lot of that comes from two things. One is basically overblowing. So you're playing to the point where the tone gets this crackle on the edge. And then the other is really front heavy articulation. So a very front, like a very hard T sound on the articulation. Let me see if I can play that real quick.
Yeah, man.
And that's very different from somebody like Miles Davis, who was like, you're underblowing the horn. And when you do that, you bring in all those great kind of whisper sounds and that kind of puffy, pillowy texture. And he's using much more of a da or even a za tongue, like a Z sound. So those are really like kind of the extremes, the hot and the cool of trumpet playing,
Right. And again, so much of that was, just down to their own physiology and, just their facial structure and, or again, just the ear, the way they wanted to express themselves. So yeah, tone is absolutely one big differentiator. I always say that Woody Shaw came in and totally changed the game in terms of, melodicism and vocabulary. Like there was way to think about improvising before Woody and in terms of a linear fashion, and then ways to think about improvising after Woody, just in terms of the intervals he used, the way he moved around the range of the horn. Is there any chance, I know this is tough stuff to do unprepared, but you can demonstrate any of Woody's approach?
Well, I have one Woody Shaw lick that I lifted many years ago. This is from that record he did with Larry Young and Joe Henderson called If. It's Unity. The song is If.
Right.
With Elvin Jones on drums, I think. So that's Sweet. It. That's all the Woody you're getting today.
Sweet.
He really takes that same concept, sound concept of Lee Morgan and the articulation, the really aggressive articulation, and he adds in this his own. What makes him so special is he was inserting language from other key centers via the pentatonic scale and kind of weaving in and out of like different key centers in the middle of his lines. And it was just like, it makes you, what is that? You know what I mean?
Right.
And he's kind of been the only guy to do that in that way. There's some people who copy his stuff, of course, but he's really singular in that.
Totally. And it gave you that impression that, yeah, you're right. You never really know where he was landing, always kind of floating, this great sense of energy, of movement.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And an amazing composer too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, really a unique voice. And for people who are not hip to Woody Shaw, that is, you should be. Well, John, yeah, let's talk about the new album, man, because the originals are just beautiful. A lot of really unique concepts on this disc. We previewed The Bet on our site, which is a great tune, named after an Anton, or not. Yeah, I guess it is named after an Anton Chekhov short story.
Yeah. This is a short story that I heard of some years ago. It's well written, of course, being Chekhov, but also it's just such an interesting concept. About this lawyer and this banker. They're debating the efficacy of the death penalty, or whether that should be a punishment at all, or which would be worse, the death penalty or solitary confinement. So they make a wager that the lawyer is going to go live in isolation for like 10 or 15 years. And he has like a house all to himself. And he has a piano and all the books he could want and everything. I'm not going to tell the whole story. You should go read it. It'll only take you a couple hours, But when I wrote The Bet, I was like maybe 3 weeks or a month out from the recording date. And I just I had my list together of songs. And I was like, I need something a little more modern, something with some energy, something with like a soaring melody, and I was inside my house. I had like one day off from gigs, and it was a gorgeous day in early May, the kind where I would normally want to be like outside with my friends in the park, riding my bike or something like that. And I was just sitting there thinking, God, I cannot leave this room until I write this song. And that kind of it made me think of the short story. And then something about that, when I think of something external outside of music, it's just like a spark hits and I can start going immediately. I almost hear the melody like right away,
No, that's interesting. I guess it's because you think of songwriting, you're so like paralyzed by the fear of having writing songs. But if you take a step back and relate to it through another art form, it's like suddenly cool. Are you a reader? I mean, it sounds like you're a reader.
I do like to read. I wouldn't call myself a voracious reader or a speed reader, but I've been reading pretty much nonstop since college is when I really started reading for fun. In high school, you have the required reading, and they're all good books, but I was just like, I don't want to read this, But into college, I started finding stuff that I actually liked, and just one thing led to another,
And Chekhov was up there among them. Yeah,
I really started with Dostoevsky, and then got into Tolstoy, and then Chekhov, and it's such a great again, another great tradition of writers. Well, it goes up through Hemingway and Philip Roth.
Oh yeah, no, those are all on my list of favorite writers as well. And you talk a lot about songs needing to have a story. I wonder if you could unpack that a little bit and what you mean by a song needing to have a story.
People used to tell, like in college, I remember hearing my professors say, well, you're playing great, but you're not telling a story. And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm playing trumpet. Like, how am I going to tell you a story? It's not about like a literal story. It's about, you need characters, and you need a development, and you need like an arc. You need the story to go somewhere, So in music, it's very abstract. But that's one of the things about, and like, I know you had Chick Corea on recently. He's such a great programmatic writer. A lot of his songs are written about a book that he read or some kind of story. And, obviously it doesn't need to line up exactly perfectly. But just to have that kind of kernel of an arc, and like, what would give this a fitting conclusion. I find it's not that I'm trying to tell a story, but when I think about it as a story, the composition has so much more integrity than if it's just some vamp or some cool pads or a little figure that gets repeated a million times. It's like, that gets boring, Right. You have to develop it.
When there's a through line where there's some consistency. So does the melody of The Bet, does that contain any kind of kernel of narrative? And can you play it and maybe?
I wouldn't say it contains a kernel of narrative. It's just,
it's just a cool melody.
It's just a cool melody, man. I try not to get, like I said, to get too deep with it. And once the muse of the of the song takes over, I don't get in the way. I don't think about, well, what would the coal miner do now? You know, I'm like, stop it. Just let the music tell you what it's supposed to do, you know?
Right on, man. Right on. Can we hear a little bit of that melody?
Yeah, I think so. Like I said, I got COVID chops.
And like I said, I've got permanent COVID chops, so.
Yeah, so that's just the opening phrase.
And you can so hear, you know, kind of that Woody influence, that Joe Henderson influence, you know, that Tad Dameron influence. And I know these guys were all heroes of yours because, you know, Joe and Tad, you cover on this disc. You know, you've got a great cover of Shade of Jade on there, really burning. And you got a really nice cover of Lady Bird on there, which is, you did something really cool with the arrangement. You kind of slowed it down. You're familiar with the term chopped and screwed, like the Houston hip hop chopped and screwed.
No, I don't know about that.
They cut it apart, they stretch it out, they slow it down, and that's kind of what you did.
Wow.
Yeah, cool. and that way you could really kind of understand too Tad's genius in this song, because he was using, as I'm sure as you can explain better than I could, a really novel turnaround for this song. You know, so many songs of the Great American Songbook are built on building blocks like turnarounds, which is, you know, basically just a way to get from one part of the song, turn it around and get back to the beginning. And a lot of times it's a really conventional you know, and I'm not explaining this to you. I'm explaining this to maybe people who are listening who may be curious, because we like to get into pop jazz theory here on the show. Yeah, pretty conventional building blocks to get back to the beginning of the song. But Tad did something different, right?
Yeah. So there's a really popular Jacob Collier video going around where he talks about light harmony versus dark harmony, and it sounds like, you know, some Star Wars kind of thing, but it's really just sharps versus flats. You know what I mean? And what Tad did in that song is, instead of having like usually the 3-6-2-5 turnaround, you're introducing a secondary dominant. So you're raising the leading tone to the minor 2 chord. The third of the 6th chord is the leading tone. So that's a lifting sensation, right?
Yeah, totally.
But what Tad did was he inverted it, and he used tritone subs for all those chords. So it goes 1, flat 3, flat 3, flat 6, flat 2, back to the 1. So he takes the turnaround and he darkens it up significantly. And I've always been drawn to tunes like that. I also have a tune that the tenor player on this record, Paul Jones, arranged by Cole Porter, Everything I Love.
Yeah.
And I always love Cole's writing, because he also will take a song and add darker flat keys, you know.
You like it when, people join the dark side. That's what you're all
basically
about.
Basically, that's what I like, and that's the jazz Sith. Yeah. So when I did this arrangement of Lady Bird, I just thought, well, what if I did that on the whole song? You know, and that's kind of what I did. I was also really inspired by Robert Glasper's rendition of Afro Blue from Black Radio Experiment with Erykah Badu, and it's just like so flowing and beautiful and chilled out and cool. And I was like, well, I could do that with this song too, you know.
And you absolutely do, man. It's gorgeous. I encourage people, go check it out. It's available now for streaming, but buy it. Now is the time to buy it, you know, support artists. So go check out, you know, John Lake's stuff. You know, John, for people who, again, maybe if, you know, even 3-6-2-5-1 and, you know, raising the third, whatever was over their heads. I know you talk a lot, because you do some teaching, you know, about improvising. And again, any of our viewers who may be, they're horn players, or, you know, they're guitar players, the keyboard players, and want to start getting into improvisation more. What's some advice, you know, some basic advice that they can maybe take away with that would help them in their improvisation journey?
Right. One thing that was impressed on me at a young age by my teacher, Brad Good, who's a phenomenal trumpet player and composer of his own right, was to don't wait to incorporate your ear. You know, a lot of people want to learn improvisation out of a book and learn licks and the kind of plug and play method, which is a valid method, you know. I've done my share of that for sure, but don't hesitate to use your ear and start transcribing, because jazz is a language, you know, and what's the point of learning the dictionary if you're not going to speak the language, is my philosophy. So choose a solo, Miles Davis, or an early solo, Big Spiderback, something that's not too challenging, a nice medium tempo, and learn the solo by ear to where you can sing it all the way through, and then learn it on your instrument and go phrase by phrase. Nowadays with the digital thing, it's really, you just start and stop it, but learn it on your horn to where you can play the whole solo on your instrument. That's a transcription, you know, and then you write it down. Then you write it down and you can break apart the nuts and bolts and study it. But it's really important to get that language in your ear and under your fingers as a trumpet player. You know, as you mentioned, the vocal thing, it's a lot about placement with us. So you have to hear it and you have to place it in the oral cavity with the air. It's crucial.
Yeah, man. No, good advice. Start with the ear. Start with the ear. It's good advice for anybody, not just trumpet players. But yeah, for trumpet players, those fellow sufferers, it is learning about the physicality thing. It is extremely physical instrument. John, man, if people wanted to check out the album, to buy it, to learn more about you, where could they do that?
Well, the best place that helps me is Bandcamp. So that's johnlakejazz.bandcamp.com. You can also access that through my website directly, which is johnlakejazz.com. It's also available on, you know, every platform you can think of. So Spotify, iTunes Music, whatever you want to do. I'm also on Instagram. I'm Trumpet Lake, at Trumpet Lake. And you can find me on Facebook too, and Twitter, but I don't do too much on Twitter, you know.
Yeah, that's all right. You know, it's you're one of the cool kids. Got the Bandcamp, the website, the Instagram.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Very cool, man. John, this has been an absolute pleasure. Like I said, the new album is great. I encourage everybody watching, go check it out right now, especially if you're into that hard bop trumpet sound, but kind of want to take it into the modern day. This is the album that does it. Appreciate you talking to us, man. Thanks for joining us for Last Call. This has been awesome.
Of course, Brian. Thanks for having me, man. Cheers.
You're very welcome. I'll see you backstage, brother.
Okay.
So long. Bye. So cool. Thank you to John Lake for chatting with us today on The Last Call. His new album, Seven Angels, like I mentioned, is out right now. Trumpet heads, hard bop jazz heads, you're definitely going to want to check out this album. Let me remind you once again about our 99-cent offer. As again, right now, for just 99 cents per month for 3 months, you can unlock unlimited digital access to all of the articles on jazziz.com, including the web articles that are featured in this magazine, which is all about fusion. Nice cover story on Chick Corea in there. You sign up for that subscription rate, 99 cents for 3 months. You will be automatically enrolled to receive a complimentary print issue come the fall when we release our next issue, the fall 2020 issue, all about the art of the album. It's going to be really cool. We hope you become a subscriber because we love having you on board, watching us, checking us out, joining us for The Last Call. I'm going to close things down at the bar here. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. I'm Brian Zimmerman. See you next time, everyone. So long.